So just for the record, if you would tell us your name and the years of your service and the branch of your service.
My name is Scott Camil, Camil. I was in the Marine Corps from 1965 through 1969, July of 65 to July of 69.
So it was a complete enlistment that you were in for?
A 4-year enlistment.
4-year enlistment. Yes. Where were you raised?
Where was I raised?
Yes, sir.
Hialeah, Florida.
Uh-huh.
I was born in Brooklyn, New York. When I was about 4, my parents got divorced. My mother married someone else. They moved to Hialeah, and that's where I was raised.
Okay. Was there any family history of service?
My real father was in World War II.
Okay.
He later went to prison for marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
Before I went to Vietnam, I went to see him to see what kind of advice he could give me about going to war. And his only advice was keep a journal, which I did not do.
So you Vietnam sort of, well, you would have been aware of clearly the Second World War and then Korea. So war is something that was in the culture as you were growing up, all right?
Yeah, I would say more like Cold War.
Cold War stuff, yeah.
I remember being a young child in school, and we had drills, air raid drills.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to get bombed by the Russians, and duck and cover, laying on the floor under the window, getting under the desks. So we were raised to believe that there was going to be war with Russia. They were trying to take over the world, and they wanted to take over the world, and we needed to stop them somewhere else before we had to fight them in our own streets. So I believed that. I couldn't tell you what a communist was, but I knew it was okay to kill them.
Yeah. I remember that too. I was raised in South Africa in the 80s, and there were two dangers. It was black and red. That was the language that they used at the time. Very resonant at that moment for me because we were still doing that in the 80s and 90s. So you when did you start thinking about joining the Marine Corps?
In high school, it was a requirement that we would, to graduate, write a career paper on what we wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
And we had to write on 2 different jobs, if you will, careers. So I wrote one paper on being a lawyer, and I wrote one paper on being a Marine. And during this time growing up, being a man was really important. At that time, a man was someone that didn't show emotion, that didn't cry, that would do all the hard things that needed to be done. A man.
Yeah.
And the Marine Corps motto was, the Marine Corps builds men. And everybody that I knew, all the males that I knew, wanted to be a man. And so that was a pretty simple choice.
So this was when you were 16, 17 years old, you were writing this paper?
Yes. And also, there were certain rules that I grew up with. You have to do what your parents say.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do what your teachers say. You have to do what the rabbi says. You have to go to school. You have to graduate school, and you have to serve in the military. So I was taught that we lived in the best country in the world,
mm-hmm.
and that it was my duty, because I was lucky enough to be born here, it was my duty to pay the country back, and that payment would be in terms of service in the military.
Yeah.
So I believed that I was supposed to do it. Then when I was in high school, recruiters came, and they talked me into joining the Marine Corps while I was still in high school in the delayed enlistment program.
Okay.
Which is about where they got 80% of their enlistees. And so in that program, they tell you, you get extra pay, you get more benefits because your time for pay and benefits starts when you sign the paper. You get to finish high school, and then you go to boot camp.
Yeah.
And so I signed up in the delayed enlistment program, and 3 days after graduation, I was at Parris Island.
Parris Island. This is 64, 65.
65.
65. And so the Vietnam War was not what it would become in terms of like the national profile of the thing, right?
No, but I knew I was going to be going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
We had a government class.
Okay.
And the teacher said, if you could end the war in Vietnam by dropping an atomic bomb on Saigon, how many people would be for it? And we all raised our hands.
Wow.
And then the teacher said, Saigon is the capital we're fighting for. Why would we bomb our own capital? Vietnam is going to affect all of the males in this class, and you need to learn about it.
Yeah.
So that gave me an idea a little bit, but communism versus Americanism was something that was required, and it was all about the communists trying to take over the world. So I had no doubt that it was that my parents, my teachers, my rabbi, my whole society all endorsed this. And of course, I wanted to do what everybody thought was the manly, correct thing
to do. So do you remember your first days of basic training?
Yes. What I remember is getting off the bus at night, being happy-go-lucky kind of, and there was a yellow line, and once you crossed that yellow line, you were on the base.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I crossed that yellow line with my little packet of papers, this guy started yelling at me and screaming at me and pushing me, and it was different than what I expected. On the bus ride from the front gate to where they took me, the driver stopped the bus because we were talking on the bus and laughing, and he said, "No talking, no laughing, or I'm going to kick somebody's ass. Anybody here think they can kick my ass?" And he walked up and down and looked at each one of us. "Do you want to try to kick my ass?" So that was a little bit different than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Then we got deposited at the barracks building where we got deposited. I had a new haircut. I brought things with me to bring. They took all of that stuff away, everything personal. And a lot of stuff was thrown in the garbage. And the next morning, they woke us up very early. And one of the things that was done, we marched to a barbershop, and I had this fresh haircut, and boom, now I was shaved bald. And a lot of yelling and screaming. And that first morning when they woke us up, it was still nighttime in my old life. And they, all of a sudden, the lights came on. They threw these big metal trash cans down the barracks. They were running up and down, pushing double bunks over, pushing people, yelling and screaming. And I thought I was in a bad dream, and I was trying to wake up. But it was real.
Yeah. And what is that process, that complete, like, disorientation that they put you through? What do you think? Because that's what it is. Like, all the order, everything that you know about yourself, from your haircut to your individualism, it's all broken down.
They explain that they have to take the civilian out of you and rebuild you as a Marine, and this is part of the process.
Yeah. Break you down and build you back up. Yeah.
Take all the notions that you have about what's right, what's wrong, how life works, and take that away from you and put their own idea of how life works and what's important.
Are there any particular anecdotes, other anecdotes that stand out about basic training?
There's one that I've told before, and that is the job in boot camp was to make situations that there was no way to win.
Yeah.
And make you deal with those situations. So there was no speaking without permission.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that I had to go to the bathroom. I would say, "Sir, Private Camil requests permission to make a head call, sir." And then you say, "What do you want, scumbag?" or something like that. And I say, "Sir, Private Camil requests permission to make a head call." And then he could let you go to the bathroom, which was called the head, or he could make you earn the right to go to the bathroom. So one of the ways that you would earn the right to go to the bathroom was turning on your siren. So you have to run around the barracks 3 times with your siren going, come back. After the 3rd time, stop, request permission to speak again. Once you get permission, request to go to the head again. And sometimes they let you, and sometimes they would do things like, "Is it an emergency?" "Yes, sir. We're going to wait an hour. If you don't piss or shit on yourself, I'm going to kick your ass for lying."
Wow.
So those kind of situations came up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, just totally disempowered, totally at their, yeah. After basic training, Paris Island, you were signed up for the infantry, Marine infantry, or?
No, we didn't have a job description
Yet?
out of boot camp. When we graduated boot camp, then we got our MOS, which is military occupation specialty. Mine was 0800. Infantry would be 0300 in the Marines. But then you go to ITR, infantry training, because all Marines are considered to be infantry to start with.
Yeah.
And so we did the stuff that the infantry would do, mountain climbing, escape and evasion classes, first aid, demolitions, just all the kind of training that you would have to do. We got to train on machine guns, M79 grenade launchers, something called, it was like a rocket launcher, but it was a portable one that you opened up and fired as opposed to the big ones. And you got to, it was really fun to get to shoot all of these weapons and try all of these weapons and learn all of this stuff. A lot of training, boxing, karate, judo, knife fighting, how to shoot, a lot of things that at that time in my life, I was really happy to be learning.
Yeah. How long was that? How long was ITR?
I think ITR might have been a month. I think boot camp might have been 2 months. And whenever it would be hard for me, and I was thinking, oh, this is terrible, I got to get out of here. I would think about people who I knew who were Marines, that I thought that I was tougher than. And I'd say to myself, that fucker could do it, I could do it. So.
And after ITR, did you get to go home for a little while? Or?
You get assigned to your duty station.
Duty station,
so
okay.
You report into your duty station, and as soon as I reported into my duty station, I requested orders for Vietnam. Basically, we're at formation. They said 2 quotas had come in from Vietnam. Anybody interested? I raised my hand. So then I went home on leave. Then I came back from my leave and reported into my unit at Camp Lejeune, and I got sent to something called, hopefully the name will come back to me. And it was a place where we got ready to go to Vietnam. So first I went to, Station is what it was called. So first I went to California, Camp Pendleton, where I had guerrilla warfare school, mountain climbing school, escape and evasion school, demolition school, all kinds of stuff like that. And then I think that might have lasted maybe a month. And then I went to Okinawa for more advanced guerrilla warfare school, mountain climbing, all the same stuff all over again.
And you entered into Vietnam via Okinawa, directly from Okinawa?
Right. And so we flew in a regular airline plane to Vietnam. So that was the first thing that was different than my expectations. My expectations were we were going to be charging off of a little boat that the ramp would open. We'd be charging the beach and going to fight like what we saw in World War II movies. So getting off the plane at an airport and nobody shooting at you and stuff, it just seemed kind of odd to me.
Where was it? Was it Cameron Bay or was it Da Nang? Okay, yeah.
So then I reported with my orders to a building you're supposed to report to. And then they told me that you're going to sleep in this building tonight. Tomorrow at 0800, you're going to be picked up by a 6x, which is a kind of truck, on this bench over here, and they're going to take you to your unit.
Okay.
So then I went to sleep. The next morning, I got picked up by the truck, and it took me out to the unit. So the first thing I noticed going out to the unit was we passed a sign, and I actually have photographs of the sign. And the sign says, "Pogues, you are now leaving the rear."
Yeah.
So I felt manly. Then on the way to the unit, we came under fire. So I got to my unit. I was a new guy in the unit, and because I was a new guy in the unit, I was put on guard duty. So I got to the unit March 24th, 1966. Because I was a new guy in the unit, several things happened. The first thing people said, "Hey, where are you from, man?" I said, "I'm from Florida." So they said, hey, Maine is from Florida. So I met Maine. He was from Jacksonville. I was from Hialeah, and he became my first friend.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because I was a new guy, I was put on what was called shit detail. It was a choice of guard duty or mess duty. I didn't really have the choice. I was assigned to guard duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the first thing I noticed was I didn't like the rules. So this guard duty was for an artillery unit, a 105 howitzer unit, and I was in that unit. And so on guard duty, the rules were you were not allowed to have your weapon loaded. You were not allowed to fire without permission. And I was thinking, I'm in a war and I can't have my weapon loaded? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I violated the rules. That's the kind of person I am. I think for myself, and after my thought, if I think what you've asked me to do doesn't make sense, I'm probably not going to do it. I trust my judgment.
Yeah.
So there were 4 of us on each post. There were 4 posts, 1 in each corner of the base, and 4 people on each post. Each post had a 50 caliber machine gun, which is very powerful, an M60 machine gun, which is very powerful, 2 automatic M14s, cases of grenades, and claymore mines around the outpost. And 2 people would be inside asleep, and 2 people would be awake on the top. And this duty was nighttime duty. So right before dark, we would go out to our post. So let's say this table represents the post. And right behind right behind us was a mountain. So we didn't know at the time, but somebody with a brain should have figured out that they're sitting up there watching how we do everything. And they were. And so on the night of April 18th, 1966, we were attacked and overrun. That was my first combat. First time I killed a person. First time I saw a person killed. My first real war experience. About 1:30 in the morning, I was awake on top of the post. And right out in front of me, all of a sudden, about over here, a trip flare went off. And a trip flares planted in the ground with wires, and somebody hit the wire. This thing shot up in the air, went shoo, pop. The light went off, and all of these people stood up. They had guns. And they were inside the wire already. As soon as I saw them, I started shooting. So I was the first one to fire. My post was the only post that was not taken. The other 3 posts fell. I think the main reason that my post wasn't taken was because my post didn't guard anything significant. So let's say that this represents my post over here in this corner. Okay, there's another post over here. Here's the mountain behind us. Okay, here's the fuel dump and the ammo dump. Here are the 6 howitzers. So these 2 posts are guarding the howitzers and the ammo dump, and this post. So these 3 posts fell, and the enemy ran through the gun pits, shooting people. We had 5 men killed and 28 men wounded out of 90 of us. The enemy left 40 of their own behind, dead. At one time during the night, Lieutenant Brooks came to my post to see if we had any wounded or dead and brought us ammo. The next morning, the infantry came. Once the infantry came, we could leave our posts, and our first job was it was several kind of things. Taking all of the wounded Americans up to the front for medevacs, taking the dead Americans up to the front, making sure each of the Vietnamese that was laying on the ground was dead, putting a bullet in their head, taking their weapons, and taking any intelligence information they had and bring that up front. So I was one of the people who went around and put a bullet in each person's head. Then I went to the front and I saw where the 5 dead Marines were, and they had ponchos covering their bodies. So I pulled the ponchos off to see who they were. One of them was my friend Maine, my first friend. And I thought, this war stuff's not going to be as much fun as I expected. I realized that I was in a place where it was people's job to kill me. And they were allowed to do that. That was their job. And if I got killed, I couldn't say, time out, King's X, give me a second chance. I would really be dead. And I didn't want to be dead. So I decided at that time that I was going to get them back for what they did to us, that I was going to be ruthless, that I would have no compassion. And I was also angered because I believed that we were going to Vietnam to protect the South Vietnamese who wanted to have a democracy from the North Vietnamese who were communists and who were trying to take them over. That raid on my camp was not the North Vietnamese. It was Viet Cong sappers. They were South Vietnamese. So it made me hate all Vietnamese because I thought, damn, my friend just got killed by the people who came to fucking hell.
Yeah.
Fuck these people. Fuck them.
Yeah.
So I became very hard, and I volunteered for every opportunity I could to lead patrols. I wanted to go out in the field. I wanted to fight. I wanted to get them back. There came a time during my time that I decided I wanted to be a forward observer. Mm-hmm. So the night after the attack, the very next night, I was back on that damn post. And as soon as it got dark, I was like this until sunrise. I was just shaking all night. During the battle, I was fine. But after the battle, I'm like this. In anticipation of the battle, I'm like this. I never really understood that. I have great, even my fitness report from Vietnam talks about my presence of mind. But just waiting for it to happen, and when it's over, was the hardest time for me. And while it was going on, it was really exciting. So I have mixed feelings because I'm anti-war now. But I would be lying if I didn't say it was enjoyable sometimes. It wasn't enjoyable when my friends died, but it was enjoyable for me when I was killing them.
Yeah.
So I became a forward observer. And so an artillery unit shoots artillery, and somebody from that unit goes with the infantry, finds the targets, radios those targets in, and the artillery shoots at those targets, and then that person adjusts the artillery onto those targets.
You've got this grid, right?
So I have a map and a compass.
Yeah.
And it's my job to know where I am all of the time. That was way before GPSs and stuff like that. And after a while, I was able to know where I was just by landmarks, because it was for some reason, it wasn't hard for me to read a map and a compass and determine where I was. And what I would always do anyway, so say I'm going to call in artillery on you. I'm going to look on the map where I think you are. I'm going to look on the map where I think I am. And I'm going to get on that line, and I'm going to then, on that line, I'm going to add 200 meters to where I call in that artillery.
That's right.
So then I can move the artillery in on the enemy and have less of a chance of that artillery landing on me.
Yeah.
And for the infantry commanders would always say, hey, Artie, where are we? Because that's what they would call the artillery guy, is Artie. And whenever fighting would start, you would hear Artie up, or corpsman up, or machine guns up. And you'd go up to where the shit was and do what you were supposed to do. And so I liked that job. I think that job was the best job a person like me could have ever had. I'm not good with authority. Mm-hmm. I'm more thinking for myself kind of person. and in the Marine Corps, it's about blind obedience to authority. And so I'm in a unit called Alpha Battery, 1st Battalion, 11th Marines. And then I'm attached to Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. So when I was with Charlie Company, the only people who could tell me what to do would be the commanding officer, a captain, or a platoon commander who would be a lieutenant. None of the lifers could bother me. So lifers would be people who are career people who've been in there 15, 20 years, whatever. And they're the people who usually fuck with you because it's a chain of command and that's how it works.
Yeah.
And the lower ranked you are, the more shit you get. So I didn't have anybody fucking with me. So that worked for my temperament. Then when I would go back to the rear, to the battery, they'd want to fuck with me and put me on details and stuff. And I'd say, I'm on standby to go out. So they couldn't fuck with me either. So I didn't have anybody fucking with me. So that made it just wonderful for me. I had respect. I had a lot of power, calling in artillery, calling in airstrikes for somebody who's 19, 20 years old. I actually had my 20th and 21st birthdays.
Wow.
Both of them. So then, basically what the infantry does is the infantry has something called a TAOR, a total area of responsibility. So we have a infantry company, and then there's an infantry battalion. So after were overrun, they moved our artillery unit into an infantry unit, so we would have protection from the infantry unit. An infantry battalion has 4 companies. So one company's job would be to be in the battalion headquarters and provide the protection for the battalion headquarters. Then we had 3 areas in the TAOR outside of the company area. So let's just say that this here is the company area. So over here we had a place called the Mud Flats. Over here we had a place called the Sand Dunes and the Island. Over here we had a place called the Horseshoe. And there was a company base at each of those 3 things. So 4 companies, 3 outside bases, 1 inside base. So the companies would rotate. 1 month the company would be in battalion headquarters. Then it would go to the island. Then it would go to the Mud Flats. Then it would go to the Horseshoe. Then it would come back in. So you'd be out 90 days, and then you'd be in 30 days. Those 30 days that you would be in, you still went on patrols and you went on operations, but you were in. And so I spent my time at those 3 areas. And when I think about Vietnam, that's the bulk of where my time was really spent. The bulk of my combat all took place in this TAOR, and it was in a place called Dai Lac. So it was about 18 miles south of Da Nang on Highway 1, and probably about 4 or 5 miles north of Hoi An on Highway 1. And you come to a highway called Highway 4, and if you would take that Highway 4 across to the first bridge, that's where the TAOR for the Mud Flats was. And it was called the Mud Flats because it was, when it rained, you'd be in the mud all the time. It was a lot of trudging. At the Sand Dunes and the island, it was out on the beach and an island across the water. So that was a sandy area. And then the Mud Flats was more like jungle. And there was a river that was shaped like a horseshoe, so it was called, the Horseshoe. So on September, I should know these dates better. I'm 70 years old now, so my memory's not as good as I think it is, or should be. But on, I think it was September 18th, 1966, I was wounded for the first time. And it was an operation in the Mud Flats, and it was called Operation Stone. And so there was a river on that side. There was a company from another battalion on the other side of the river. We had 2 companies, one on this side, one on this side, and then a 3rd company marched forward, pushing the enemy to where we ended up killing everybody. We killed either 272 or 292 people. Many of them were women and children. But I didn't really care. In my training, I had learned that the communist women were just communist baby factories, and they would produce children that would fight our children, and that their children were just baby commies that would grow up to kill our children when they grew up. And so just like when you're wiping out cockroaches, when you're trying to wipe out communism, you have to get them all. So I believed that, and I believed that was okay. I have a little bit of a problem with that in the sense that I'm Jewish. I learned lessons from my grandmother, especially about our relatives that died in the concentration camps. I didn't really understand how soldiers could do that. Mm-hmm. And then I became a Marine and I did that. So it's a problem I have with myself over how that happened and how come I didn't see that was happening when it was happening. So in Operation Stone, as we're moving toward this village, we're spread out. And the general rule is that there's 20 meters between each person, a minimum of 20 meters. So when you step on something and blow up, it only kills one person at a time. When I think about it now, the amount of pressure, knowing that each step you take could be your last step, and seeing people step on things and blow up, but you still have to cross that field. And we did it each time. I don't know many people that would do that. Let's just say from this building right now where your car is parked, if somebody stepped on a mine trying to get to the parking lot every day, would you be willing to use that parking lot? So every day we walked the ground, and some people blew up and some people didn't. And that's about how 80% of our casualties happened. So we were taking the village, and the village is like this, but we're spread out like this. So as we get closer to the village, our lines start collapsing and getting closer and closer. We get to the village, there's a gate, the lieutenant kicks the gate open, a bouncing Betty goes up. A bouncing Betty is a explosive device planted in the ground, and when it's set off, it gets to about 8 foot high and it explodes. So a regular explosion in the ground is like this, so if you're close to it, you have a good chance of missing it. But when it goes up like this, you're just screwed. So it took out 7 of us. And at the time that it went off, that's the village. We're going through the gate, to the gate. The lieutenant and his radio operators are in front of me. I'm turned sideways and I'm reaching behind and I'm pulling my radio operator up over the dike to help him because we help each other. And when I was doing that, I heard an explosion behind me. And what I'm going to tell you now was that fast. I heard the explosion. I smelled the explosion. And in my brain, I was thinking that somebody accidentally discharged an M79 grenade behind me. Then I noticed that the ground was coming at me. And I didn't understand that. And then I woke up. The first thing I noticed was my rifle was in the mud. And if there's a such thing as the 10 Commandments for the Marine Corps, there's not 10 of them, but you can never have a dirty rifle. Your rifle can never be on the ground. Your rifle can never be in the mud. My rifle was in the mud. I didn't understand how that could be possible. And then I started hearing people calling for help. And then I tried to get up, and it hurt. And then I noticed I was bleeding. I opened up my belt to look to see if I was wounded in a place that was very important to me. And I wasn't. So I was really happy. I thought, wow, I just got a Purple Heart, and I still have my stuff that's important to me. after that operation, there were just lots more operations. I have 2 pages of operations. When I think of Vietnam, I spent about 600 days there. When I talk about Vietnam, I talk about 3 or 4 days because it's the worst days. And that's what's in my mind, not the normal stuff, but the days that have seared in my memory. So, in August, the date that I got that first Purple Heart was February 12th.
February 12th.
February 18th. It wasn't
September 18th. So 67 at this stage?
That's 67.
Yeah.
Then
what was the injury, if you don't mind
Oh,
asking?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All superficial.
Okay.
No broken bones, no broken arteries, no organs hurt. So I still have a piece of metal in my leg, and because I was standing sideways, so I had like a piece cut me across the face, across my arm. I had cuts and some shrapnel, but I didn't have nothing that really mattered. I was really, really lucky. I was just really lucky. And the whole time in Vietnam, I was lucky like that. And I don't really know why. And it's made me believe that I'm sort of invincible. So I sort of have this belief that I'm not going to die. And so when you think you're not going to die, you're able to be braver. In August of 67, we had a new lieutenant. And, before we kept having new lieutenants because they died quickly. We were on the island, and the island was a really bad place. It was a really bad place, and we always took lots of casualties there. So we were sent out on a patrol. The lieutenant didn't want to go on the patrol because it was a heavily mined area. But the captain ordered us to go on this patrol. So we went on this patrol. There was 19 of us. Out of the 19, 12 died. One of them, a friend of mine named Dickerson. He was from New Jersey, a skinny black kid, a really nice kid who I just bonded with. And so it hurt me for him to be dead. And so we had 12 killed, and everyone else was wounded but 3 of us. And we had to be rescued. Then in October 12th, we were going to the DMZ to fight against the North Vietnamese army. So I'd been in Nam now about 18, 19 months, and all of my battles had been against the Viet Cong. So this was going to be our first battle against the infantry. I mean, the North Vietnamese. On that operation, my company was cut off and surrounded. We were the lead company. The tactics were such that it's a mountain, and on the other side of the mountain are all these Marines waiting. And our job is to push up the mountain, push the enemy off the other side into an ambush. Except that the enemy already knew what we were doing, and they ambushed us instead. So we were the lead company. So if you can think about 200 men, and in single file, with 30 meters between each person, that's a long fucking line.
Yeah.
And when the fighting starts, it takes a long time for people to get up there. It's not a really good fighting position. Well, they had machine guns set up at the top of this ridge. They had machine guns along the side. they were sitting in the trees above us. They were tied into the trees so their arms would be free, and they had bags of grenades and automatic weapons. So when we got into the middle, they just opened up on us. So we were surrounded, we were cut off, and we took a lot of casualties. Some people were out of food, water, medical supplies, ammo. Some people had to fight hand to hand until we were rescued. So this book is about that. I had a grenade that was dropped on me from a tree. So I got hit in the feet and in the shoulder. And again, it was insignificant. Just shrapnel, no arteries, I didn't lose my sight, no organs, just really lucky, really, really lucky. And that was October 12th. And then in November, I came home. And I still had 2 years left in the Marine Corps, so I had lots of other duties. And I, because I made good grades, the Marine Corps sent me to lots of schools. So I went to embarkation school in Middle Creek, Virginia for 6 weeks. I went to nuclear biological chemical warfare school, NCO school. I went to bunches of schools, and riot control school.
Huh.
And I became the riot control NCOIC, so that's non-commissioned officer in charge for the 10th Marine Regiment. And at the time, there were lots of demonstrations going on in Washington. And so for me, a Marine, like now I'm home from war, I have 2 years to make up for. So on the weekends, I'm going home and getting laid. You know, having sex is really important, so it's something fun that doesn't cost anything really. Not as much as it costs more than you think, but anyway, so now on weekends, we couldn't go home. We were on standby to go to Washington. So it made me hate the anti-war people. And I didn't really know anything about them, but I hated them. And I had read an article in the Sea Tiger, which was a newspaper put out by the Navy, and the Marine Corps is a part of the Navy. So it was an article about Joan Baez and her communist sympathizing friends having a concert in San Francisco. And they were collecting blood, and then that blood was going to Canada and then being shipped to Vietnam for the Vietnamese. And when I read the article, I thought, damn, I could get killed by some fucking commie with American blood. It made me very angry. So I hated the anti-war people. In riot control, you're taught that you're not the jury, you're not the judge, you're not the executioner. Your job is to protect lives. That's your job, protect lives. If you have to shoot, you're supposed to shoot to wound. So I didn't agree with that. Why shoot to wound? I'm going to shoot to kill. If I feel I have to shoot you, why would I wound you? I want you to be done. And so we were on standby to go to Washington, and I gave an instruction that if anybody threw a rock, a bottle, or anything at us, I wanted everybody to empty one magazine into the crowd. So a magazine is 20 rounds. Having 200 guys firing 20 rounds into a crowd would have been sort of like Kent State, but a lot worse. My commanding officer found out about it, and I was relieved of that duty. So I'm just telling you that to let you know how I felt about the anti-war people. I went to Europe twice. On a Med cruise and a Carib cruise. We actually was to Europe once and to the Caribbean once. So in Europe, we went to Greece, Turkey, Sardinia, Malta, Germany, and it was a shock for me. Because up until this time, I thought that the whole world looked up to the United States and that everybody wanted to be like us and that we were the best and that we were the smartest. and that everybody was thankful for us. And then every place I went, they didn't like me. They didn't like Americans. And so I didn't really understand. It just upset me that I was expected to be thanked and be a hero, and all these people think I suck. So it made me start thinking that things weren't totally how I thought they were.
Yeah.
And then I got out of the Marine Corps. And I didn't really know what I was going to do. Before I went in the Marine Corps, my parents told me what to do. My school teachers told me what to do. The rabbi told me what to do. They all provided my lodging and my food. In the Marine Corps, they told me what to do. They provided my lodging, my food, my medicine. So now, all of a sudden, I'm on my own. And it's my job to provide for myself. So that was a new challenge for me. What am I going to do? I didn't know what I was going to do. So I applied to be a cop. Both of my brothers were cops. My retired stepfather was a cop. And I thought, in fact, I can shoot people. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'll be a cop and I'll shoot people. And then I went and I took a bunch of tests and I got lots of good grades. And my 2 Purple Hearts gave me a bunch of extra points. So I was doing really great. And then they decided, but part of how it works is a lie detector test. So they told me beforehand, and the guy that told me was a friend of my dad's. He says, look, we just want you to be honest. Just be honest. So I was going to be honest, and I was totally honest. So they asked me bunches of questions. I answered. Then they asked me these other questions, and one of them was, have you ever murdered someone? And I said, yes. And they said, have you ever murdered someone in the United States? And I said, no. And they said, where did you murder people? I said, in Vietnam. And they said, that's okay. Have I ever committed arson? Yes. In the United States? No. Where? In Vietnam. That's okay. Have you ever raped? No. But I saw rape taking place and I didn't stop it. Did you see that in the United States? No. Have you ever used illegal drugs? And then they went through all this list, no. And then they got to marijuana, and the answer was yes. Have you done that? Where'd you first smoke marijuana? In Vietnam. Have you smoked marijuana since you came home? Yes. We can't hire you. You don't respect the law. And I thought, fuck. Of all of the things I did, this was perhaps what I was least ashamed of. And it was the one thing that was unacceptable to me. So now I really was in a jam, because now I'm not going to be a cop. What the hell am I going to do? So I knew I could get money on the GI Bill to go to school. I didn't like high school. I didn't like the authoritarian tone of it, blind obedience to authority. But I knew I could get money on the GI Bill, so I figured, well, I'll go to school till I can figure out what I'm going to do. And then in school, there were all these kids trying to avoid the draft, and they didn't know why I was wasting my time since I'd already been in the military. But it turned out I liked school. I didn't like high school, but I loved college. I had 4 years to mature from the Marine Corps. I was an NCO. I had developed a lot of leadership qualities. So I did good in school. And one of the first books I was assigned to read was a book called A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. So I read the part on Vietnam, and I made an appointment to see the professor. I'd never made an appointment to see a professor before, and it was because I was upset with what the book was saying. Not because I really cared about anything, but they think that when you make an appointment, it's because you're really interested. So I told the teacher that he was a professor, and I told him that I was a Vietnam vet, that I read the part about Vietnam, and it was wrong. And he smiled at me, and he gave me other stuff to read. So I read this other stuff. And the history of Vietnam that I read upset me, because I learned that Vietnam was a colony, and they wanted self-determination and independence, just like we did when we were a colony. So we ought to be able to understand that. They fought against the French, and then they were attacked by Japan. Now they're fighting against the Japanese. The OSS parachutes into Vietnam and makes a deal with Ho Chi Minh. We'll help train and arm your soldiers, and your job is to kill Japanese and to protect American pilots shot down over Indochina. And in return for that, when the war is over, you can have self-determination and independence. So they made the deal with us. Then, when the war was over, the first fucking day, they took and they released those Japanese prisoners. They armed those Japanese prisoners, and the Allies, with the rearmed Japanese prisoners, went after Ho Chi Minh's army, because somebody has decided that now that fascism's done, the new enemy is communism. And we went right after our allies. And when I read that, it really pissed me off, because they were our allies. We made a fucking deal. What about our word? Those things were really important to me. And so I didn't believe it was true. Then one of the books that I was given to read was a book by Eisenhower called Mandate for Change. And in that book, Eisenhower said, I'm going to back up a little bit. So the Geneva, at the end of the French, so after World War II, the French can't afford to, they're decimated. They can't afford to do anything. So the U.S. pays the French to go back in and recolonize Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Now there's another war, and we call it the French Indochina War. At the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, the French are defeated. Now the U.S. pays for about 88% of that. There's a treaty signed, the Geneva Accords, signed between the French and the Vietnamese. And it says no foreign troops, no weapons, self-determination, independence. 17th parallel is a demarcation line for separating the troops. It will in no way be considered a national or international boundary. And free elections will take place that will reunite the country under one government. So the U.S. violates that. And we take a guy from New Jersey named DM. We make him the president. We train his secret police at Michigan State University. All of this information comes out of Pentagon Papers. Now we're fighting the Vietnamese. The U.S. is charged by other countries of violating the Geneva Accords. And the U.S. says, we didn't sign them. How could we be violating them?
Yeah.
Now we're fighting. And so I didn't know any of that stuff before I went. And then in Eisenhower's book, Eisenhower says that if we would have allowed the free elections to take place in 1956 like they were supposed to take place, that Ho Chi Minh would have won. And we couldn't allow a precedent to be set where people in a democratic election would elect to have a communist government. So when I read that, what that said to me was, I was in Vietnam not to defend democracy, to fight against it because we didn't like the outcome. And I felt like I had been tricked and used. And I felt that my friends had been tricked and used. And it made me very bitter towards my country. But I didn't really do anything with that, because how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to, I have my basic life to take care of, and that comes first now. So I'm seeing little things along the way that are changing who I am. And like the stories in the newspaper and on TV, they're not telling the truth. So I'm thinking, well, If what we're doing is right, why are we ashamed to tell people what we're doing? So just things like that would go in my mind, and I would just think about them, and I didn't do anything about them. And then Jane Fonda came to speak at the University of Florida, and I wanted to see what Barbarella looked like. And that was the only reason I went. I wanted to see a movie star. And so I went. It was at Grand Pond. I was smoking a joint. We were playing Frisbee. People were having a good time. And I wasn't really paying attention to her. She was way down there, and I was way up here in this hill. I couldn't really see her close up. Then all of a sudden, some of her words got into my head. And she said that the American government is lying about Vietnam. And it's the duty of patriotic Vietnam veterans to inform the public about the truth of Vietnam and what is being done in their name with their money. And for some reason, I heard that. And she was saying, duty of patriotic Vietnam veterans. I understand duty. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm patriotic. She's talking to me. So I went up there and I said, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was a sergeant in the Marines. I'm willing to talk. She took my name and my phone number. And then 3 days later, I got a phone call from somebody named Mike Oliver from an organization called Vietnam Veterans Against the War that I had never heard of. And they were having investigations into the war in Vietnam. They were not investigations, but hearings. And they asked me if I would come and testify. Without knowing anything that I had to say, except knowing that I was a Marine sergeant in Vietnam. And so I said, I'm poor, I don't have any money. How could I go to Detroit? They said, we'll send you a ticket. So they sent me a ticket. And I flew to Detroit. And that meeting was videotaped, except it wasn't video then. It was made on like 35 millimeter film or whatever kind of film they made it on. And so that film I gave you, Winter Soldier, is that film.
Yeah.
So you can see at the very beginning of the film, I come into the room, I say who I am, and they start vetting me. They look at my paperwork, am I really a veteran, And John Kerry's there, and Ken, his name will come to me. He was my replacement in Vietnam, and he was there. And he said, hey, Sergeant Camil, hey, I know this guy. So that conversation also takes place on the film. And then they have forms for us to fill out. And the forms are not what just happened here, where I just told you my story. The forms were, have you ever seen this or done this? Have you ever seen this or done this? And it was all things that were bad things. So I filled out yes, 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 yes. And then when I was up there being interviewed, you say you saw this or did this, tell us about it. You say you saw this or did this, tell us about it. So it was all the terrible things. That's what everybody testified to. So I testified on the 1st Marine Division panel. And then these hearings lasted 3 days. And so there were a lot of discussions that took place. And now for the first time, I was understanding that what I knew about Vietnam was only about what me and our unit did, in one place in time. The war went on for a long time in a lot of different places. I don't know none of that stuff, but now I'm learning all of that stuff from all of these other people there, and I'm understanding what a large scale all of that was. And in the background of that is all that stuff that I've learned and been taken in about how this war is wrong to start with. And so the last day, there was a meeting of all the veterans that testified, just for them. And Mike Oliver came in there, and he was with this group called Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and he wanted to know how the 3 days had affected us and what we were going to do about it. So we decided to form Vietnam Veterans Against the War, which was an anti-war group in 6 states in the Northeast, to form that into a national organization. So we set up a meeting for, that was, Winter Soldier was January 31st, February 1st, and 2nd, 1971. We set up a meeting for later in February in New York. We all flew to that meeting. We wrote a constitution. We wrote a set of bylaws. We divided the country into 28 sections, which we called regions. And I became the regional coordinator for Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And it was my job to organize Vietnam veterans against the war in those places. At about the same time, Playboy magazine gave us a free full-page ad, and they received 20,000 replies of veterans who were interested. So all of a sudden, I got mail from Playboy, and it was a list of all the people from Florida, Alabama, and Georgia who wanted to take part. So I divided the list into different cities. And then I Xeroxed copies of the list, and I mailed each city a list of everybody in their city and said, you guys get together, set up a meeting, get organized, and I'll come help you. And I sent that to cities all over Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. And then that was kind of my job, going around and doing those things. And then I thought the best thing we could do was have winter soldier investigations in our cities. So the people wouldn't be hearing from strangers, they'd be hearing from their own citizens. And I thought that would have a stronger effect on them rather than hearing from strangers, because I know if a stranger says something to me and someone I know says something to me, the person I know is going to have more weight than the person I don't know, unless the person I know is a liar, and I know that. So we were doing those, and then all of a sudden I started getting arrested. And in the classes that I took at UF and at Dade, Miami-Dade Junior College. So I got an AA degree at Miami-Dade in pre-law, and took all of the history classes, all of the psychology classes, all the political science classes, and I got my degree in philosophy with minors in history and political science, and that's all the stuff that I was really interested in, and it all kind of worked together. I sort of lost myself.
You started getting arrested.
So when you're working against war, you know, when I mow my yard, I go out there, I mow my yard, I get all sweaty, I do it for several hours, then I get done and I look, and it's beautiful, and I feel really good inside. There's positive reinforcement for my energy. When you're working against war, and it's 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, there's not a lot of positive reinforcement. And I started getting arrested all the time. And I felt that the arrests would be my positive reinforcement, because if I wasn't being effective, they wouldn't be after me. So I'm doing something right. I'm not quite sure what it is that's bugging them, but I'm going to stay on this trail because this is what's pissing them off. So they never understood that about me. And so the more energy they spent trying to crush me, the stronger I became, because that's just my nature. In those arrests, the total combined in all of them, I was facing death plus 120 years in prison. I had 3 jury trials. I was acquitted on all of the jury trials.
What were the charges?
So the first charge was kidnapping for ransom. And in January of 1972, I was arrested for kidnapping for ransom. I was charged with kidnapping a black 17-year-old male for $100 ransom. And the proof was the receipt that I wrote for the ransom. In that case, I was asked by a friend to pick up $100 that was owed to him by someone else. And my friend lived in Hialeah, but he was going to be coming up to Gainesville, and so he asked me if I would go pick up the money and have it for him when he came. So I went, the guy gave me the money, I wrote him a receipt for the money, and then I was arrested. So I was in jail for about 10 days, and every hour on the radio, and he could get the death penalty. And I was really not happy about it. And then this guy came, and he said, I called my mom. She called a judge she knew in Miami. He called someone he knew in Gainesville. And then this lawyer named Larry Turner came to see me. And he said, your mom sent me, my name is Larry Turner. I said, well, I already called a lawyer. I called Carol, who was a movement lawyer. He said, well, your mom called me and I can do a better job. I used to be a prosecutor. I spent a lot of time putting cases together. I'm really good at taking them apart. I said, how much would it cost? He said, about 10 grand. I said, I'll probably never see that much money in my entire life. He said, do you promise me that if you see it, you'll pay me? I said, yes. He said, then I'll do the case. So then he got me bonded out of jail. And then, a couple of weeks later, boom, they raid my house and I get arrested again. And this time it's for drugs. And I'm charged with selling marijuana and some other drugs. I don't really remember what they were. And it was at a New Year's Eve party of mine, and they said that in a handshake, I gave this undercover agent 2 ounces of marijuana so nobody else could see. But anybody who knows how big an ounce of marijuana is knows that you can't shake someone's hand with 2 ounces and hide that. So in the first trial, about 230 days passed. And then we filed a motion in Florida. There's a speedy trial rule. They have 180 days to take you to trial. If they don't, they have to throw it out. So the kidnapping got thrown out. I went to trial on the drug charges. And I was co-counsel, and I was found not guilty. Then I got arrested again, and it was for the Gainesville 8 case. And it was for conspiracy. And I was charged with conspiracy to disrupt the Republican convention with violence, teaching the use of weapons and explosives, and 6 charges like that. And then I represented myself on that. I went pro se, and we were all acquitted. And that took about 18 months. And then someone went to see my lawyer, a taxi cab driver. He said he was taking the prosecutor and the FBI guy to the airport, and they were talking about how they were going to get me. And then I was shot by federal agents. One day, there was a ring at my doorbell. It was in the morning. I was in bed. I got up. I wrapped a towel around me because I sleep without clothes. And there was this hot-looking girl. And she was looking for the person who used to live there. They didn't live there anymore. She wanted to use the phone. I let her come in to use the phone. We ended up smoking marijuana, snorting cocaine, and having sex. And I thought, wow, this is great. And so she lived in Orlando. She started coming up every weekend and spending the weekends with me. And I considered her my girlfriend. And then one weekend, she introduced me to some of her friends. And then another weekend, at some point in time, they came to Gainesville and they said, Barbara's coming up this weekend. And she asked us to tell you that she'd like you to have a gram of Coke. So we're here in Gainesville to get some Coke, so we'll go with you, and you can get some Coke too. So I went with them, and they were federal agents. And while I was in the car with them, one of them was in the back seat, one of them was driving, I was in this seat. All of a sudden, this guy grabbed me around the neck, pulled me to the headrest, shoved the gun in the back of my head, right behind my ear here, and said, if you move, I'm going to blow your fucking head off. So I thought they were going to try to rob my $100 for the Coke. And then the guy started like this, kept jamming the gun into my head. I'm a fucking Marine, you know. I grabbed his wrist. I pushed it to the headrest of the car. I unlocked the door. I was going to jump out in traffic. The driver hit the brakes. We all went forward. The driver let go of the steering wheel, grabbed both my hands, pulled my hands back like this. The guy pulled his hand free, put the gun to my back, and fired. The bullet went in behind my heart, came out my stomach. The impact of the bullet knocked me into the street because I had unlocked the car to get out. I had tennis shoes with a bunch of laces. The tennis shoes were left in the car. So that's how much impact the bullet has. Just lifted me out of my tennis shoes into the street. I was laying on the street. He sat on my chest, put the gun to my face, and all of a sudden the police pulled up and they arrested him and his partner, and I went to the hospital. And then they separated him and his partner, and they interviewed them both. And they turned out to be federal agents, DEA agents. But now they were locked in to the story that they told. And the story that they told didn't match the evidence. So some of the things, they said that they identified themselves as federal agents, told me I was under arrest, and that I grabbed his badge, threw it on the ground, and I attacked him. Well, my fingerprints weren't on his badge or his badge case. He said that I grabbed the gun and I tried to pull the gun away from him, and that he only had his pinky and his thumb in the trigger housing, and when I pulled on it, it went off by accident. The gun had a grip safety. I don't know if you guys know anything about guns, but on the handle part of the gun, where your hand fits right here, there's several guns that have a safety. So if you hold the barrel and put your finger in the trigger and go like this, it can't fire because that grip has to be compressed. So it had a grip safety, so it couldn't have fired the way that he said. Plus, my fingerprints weren't on the gun. Plus, they did a paraffin test of my hands. And the paraffin test showed that my hands weren't near the gun when it was fired. Then they did a test with the powder burns on my shirt, and they determined that the gun was fired from about 12 inches away from me, a place that I couldn't reach. Plus, it turned out that the gun wasn't either of the officers' registered weapons. It was a throwaway gun, really. So I represented myself as co-counsel, and I was found not guilty. Not only was I found not guilty, but the federal jury recommended that the agents be indicted for attempted murder. Nothing ever happened to the agents. Years later, from the Freedom of Information Act, I got papers signed by J. Edgar Hoover calling for my immediate neutralization as a threat to national security.
Jesus Christ.
So, during this period of time, I was also a student at UF. So I graduated from UF during this time. And then I was with Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I supported doing environmental work. I worked with Citizens Against the Death Penalty, and I was just an activist. I graduated from college. I went to school on the GI Bill, and then I had a friend who worked at the VA. How can I get more money? He said, file this paperwork. So I filed some paperwork saying I couldn't get a job with a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and I wanted vocational training. I picked commercial pilot. So I got my private pilot's license on my own, which was required, and then I got my instrument training and my commercial training, and I got a commercial license, and became a pilot. And then I flew for the lawyers who were my friends, for Larry Turner. And it was very fun days because we did mostly drug cases, and people would get busted and we would fly around getting them out of jail. And so I just loved it. I loved it a lot. A time came when in 1975, maybe the end of 75, beginning of 76, I was contacted by an old friend of mine named David Harris. He used to be married to Joan Baez. He spent 18 months in prison for refusing to be drafted. And we became friends because I was going everywhere speaking, and then we did some speaking gigs together, and we were the draft dodger and the hero. But I always felt that he had more courage than I did, because anybody can do what they're told. Anybody can do what they're supposed to do. but standing up against society, standing up against your government, standing up against your church and saying, I'm not going to do this. That took courage, So I felt that he was the one with courage. Then he ran for Congress, and he asked me if I would come out and work on his campaign. So I went out to California, and I helped organize his campaign. Time magazine wrote it up as the best organized congressional campaign of '76. We lost to Paul McCloskey, who was a Marine, former Marine, and a congressman, the only one to stand up to Nixon. But it was a lot of fun for me, and I'm just a Marine sergeant, really. I'm an organizer, As a Marine sergeant, my job was to get people to do stuff and to get them to do stuff that they might not want to do. So now I'm an organizer and I'm getting people to do stuff. Instead of walking through minefields, I just want them to stand in a corner holding a fucking sign. How hard can that be? So I became an organizer. I became one of the founders of Vietnam. I founded Vietnam Veterans Against the War earlier, and I helped found it as a national organization, but now I was one of the founders of Veterans for Peace. So I quit Vietnam Veterans Against the War when the war ended, and now I was joining Vets for Peace. What actually happened was I had a plane, can we stop recording for a minute?
Of course.
So I formed Veterans for Peace in Gainesville, and what got me into Veterans for Peace was I had other Marine friends. Some of them were pilots, and they were involved in stuff in South America, Central America. And then one day they started calling me up and saying, Scott, we want you to bring your plane down here. We're working with the Sandinistas. We're working in El Salvador with the rebels. What our government is doing down here is just what they were doing in Vietnam. We need your help to stop this. So I said, I'm married, I've got kids, my days of high risk stuff are over. I can't do it, I have kids. There's something called survivor guilt. How come I lived and my friends died? That's something that I have. And then I started thinking, and then back up a drum, that day on the island when we had 12 killed. So we were caught in a minefield, and then we were trying to carry 2 dead people on a stretcher out of the minefield. And they hit us with a controlled detonated mine. And everybody in front of me died, and everybody behind me died. There was a tree next to me that protected me. It clearly wasn't something I did. It was just timing. So my whole life has been like that. I'm one of the few survivors all the time, and I never really understand it, but I just get this idea that I'm not going to die. So I decide that the reason I was allowed to live in Vietnam was to work against war. So I'm going to go to Central America and see what the hell's going on. So I went to Central America. And then the big difference for me between Central America and Vietnam was in Vietnam, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
In Central America, I was a father. Now when I'm looking in the eyes of these kids with brown eyes, they look like my kids. And all of a sudden, there's this huge amount of empathy. And I found myself crying a lot. And I felt myself very sad about the things I had done in Vietnam. I still have sadness about that. And it's still one of the things that fucks with my brain a little bit. Because I'm alive and I'm happy to be alive. And I have to believe that my conduct kept me alive. If I had to do it all over again, why would I do anything different? So knowing that I would do the same thing again, that really bugs me because that means I didn't learn from my lesson. But my greed, I want to be alive, and that's more important to me. So it says that I'm the kind of person that's willing to let you die as long as I can live. So I don't like that part of me. So I came back from Central America, and I formed the Gainesville chapter of Veterans for Peace, or chapter number 14. And now there are almost 200 chapters. And then I was an official observer of the elections as a guest of the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. And I was involved in some stuff in Central America. One of the things that I was involved in, I need to think for a minute if I'm going to tell you this. Can we turn it off?
Yeah, of course.
In Nicaragua, I got to meet Miguel Diaz-Escoto, one of the founders of the Sandinistas, back when Sandino was alive. I got to have dinner at his house. I got to meet a lot of the leaders of the Sandinistas, and I got to learn about their revolution, and about their motivation and about those things. And I look back on those days with a lot of happiness, in the sense that I grew a lot, I learned a lot, and I have more respect than I can articulate for those people in Nicaragua. In Guatemala was the place I most felt at risk. I got to meet General Rojas, the Supreme Commander of the death squads. I interviewed him about people that he was killing. And aren't you worried that the U.S. is going to cut off your foreign aid? He says, we have lawyers to take care of that. I'm not worried at all. And then I helped rescue somebody who they were after. And I was also in Honduras. And then I came back and I became an activist with Vets for Peace. I had promised my first wife I wouldn't do activism anymore. She didn't want the police kicking down the door and traumatizing our kids. She divorced me. That was extremely hard for me. In Vietnam, I had a gun. In Vietnam, they weren't trying to take my family away. Now I'm here. Some judge is going to decide how much time I get to spend with my kids, and I'm going into there unarmed.
Yeah.
And I just have to accept what they say. So I didn't like that at all. I was able to work out a really good deal with the divorce, where my wife got all the money in the bank and all of the houses that we owned rental houses. And in exchange for me giving her that, there was no primary residence, no primary parent. The kids spend 3 days at my house 1 week, 4 days the next week. They stayed in the same schools, the same doctors. Their lives stayed the same. So we had that divorce, and I married someone else after a number of years. And in August will be our 20th anniversary. And unlike my first wife, who wanted to have a private house, my second wife is an activist like myself. She's in Veterans for Peace. She's an officer in Sierra Club. She's an officer in Stand By Our Plan. The two of us together do the work of 10 people easily. We get a lot of stuff accomplished. She loves having meetings there, having people there. So I'm extremely happy. I'm so happy. I have the best wife in the world. She's my best friend. She's my wife. We have no secrets. It's just wonderful. And now I'm a grandparent. And I'm a grandparent to my kids, and I'm a grandparent to her kids. Her kids not being born from me, but being born from her first husband. I'm on the Sierra Club Executive Committee. I'm the political chair of the Sierra Club. I'm the coordinator for Stand By Our Plan, the group that's fighting Plum Creek, now Plum Creek Warehouser, and we're kicking their ass. And I'm the president of Veterans for Peace. I do a lot of election work. The first election I worked on was 76 for David Harris. Today I'm working on Mike Byerly's election. This is his 5th campaign. I worked on the other 4, so this will be our 5th campaign. I'm doing Nene Roy's campaign on the school board. I've done 4 of the 5 school board members.
Wow.
And this is Eileen's 4th or 5th campaign that I'm doing. And I'm doing, I'm helping Hutch with his campaign. I'm the campaign manager for Zach Sedalis, who's running for sheriff against Sadie Darnell. So all of my organizational skills go to all of those things, and I'm always trying to broaden my base so people in the Sierra Club and Pets for Peace and Stand By Our Plan all know each other. I know who the good workers are, who people will do what they say they're going to do. I pull them into the campaigns, and we have huge success here in Alachua County, and I'm really happy about that. I'm beat up all of the time on right-wing radio here in Alachua County by the Ward Scott files. I've never actually listened to his show, but people take parts of what he says out and send it to me, and I get to listen to that. And it's kind of the same thing when the FBI was after me. This is my positive reinforcement. I'm doing something right if the T-baggers don't like me. The Democrats don't like me either because I don't like the Democrats either. I'm independent. I'm independent.
Was there a point in your life, because this is what I'm finding like amazing about your story? Do you feel safe now? Do you feel safe after your own government try to kill you? And
it's not a concern.
Yeah.
Like I just don't. I know this is stupid.
Yeah.
Like I know if I put a gun to my head and fired, then I would probably die. But I don't really think that anybody can kill me.
Yeah.
Why am I still alive? I haven't the slightest idea in the world.
Yeah. It's some life. Looking back, but I have a couple of sort of pragmatic questions, which are,
Whatever you want.
Yeah, when you were injured, those two injuries, were you medevaced out by helicopter, taken offshore?
No, I went to one place was called Charlie Med, and one place was called the other place was the hospital at Da Nang.
Okay, so it wasn't like you weren't taken to one of those offshore.
No, it's
hospital
called WINNE.
Okay.
Wounded in Action, Not Evacuated. So the first time I got hit, the lieutenant got hit, his radio operator got hit, my radio operator got hit, I got hit. They needed to have an FO. I stayed because I was an FO and I could do the job and I didn't have anything, I wasn't hurt.
Yeah.
So I stayed. The second time, we were lucky to get out of there. And what happened was, as a forward observer, we have our own radio. And so we all come out of a battery and we're each attached to different units. But each of us has a radio. So we had a frequency called the bullshit frequency, which was illegal. And we would call each other at night and talk to each other to see how we were doing. And we made our own call signs. So I'm Jewish and I was Friendship Jew. Jim Fife was Greek. He was Friendship Greek. We had a black person named Tolliver. He was Friendship Spliv. We had a guy named Flynn. He was Irish. He was Friendship Irish. So we had all of these names, and we talked to each other to see how each other was doing. And I don't remember what your question was.
No. The question was just about how where you were taken care of, and
so we always were in touch with each other. We kept an eye on how each other was doing,
yeah. When you 69, when you got out, was there any thought of re-enlisting?
A little bit, but it was very superficial. So now we're going to talk about something that nobody's ever heard from me before.
I can turn this off if you'd like.
So there were certain things about the Marine Corps that I loved. I liked having enough people to play volleyball every night. I really like getting things accomplished. I really like having a goal. They teach you in NCO school. You break that goal down into steps that need to be happened for you to create your goal, to obtain your goal. You put those steps in the right order and you knock them out. So I like getting things done. I get a lot of stuff done. I love it. I really love it. I like going down to the supervisor of elections office on election day, and all these people are going to have on their ties and their suits and their shiny shoes, and I'm going to look like I need someone to dress me. I'll need a shade, and we'll win. And they'll look at us and they'll be going like this because they think just because we don't wear their kind of clothes, we're stupid. So I really enjoy all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So when you were thinking about getting out,
So I liked things being organized.
yeah,
I liked being able to get things accomplished. I liked the travel. I liked shooting. I liked the excitement. But I couldn't deal with people that I thought were stupider than me, telling me to do things that were stupid and didn't make sense.
yeah,
I couldn't adjust to that. And in my fitness report from Vietnam, it says, um, uh, Sergeant Camil can be trusted to accomplish any mission assigned him. He's extremely cool under fire. So I like that part. But then it goes on to say, Sergeant Camil won't do anything unless he feels a need for it. And he has problems with authority. I'm very proud of that too. And I'm still like that. That's one of the things that gets me in trouble. Um, you're not my boss. I don't care if you have a badge. I don't care if you're a congressman. I don't care none of that stuff.
yeah, yeah. What was you were you becoming an activist, serious activist? There was the draft happening as well. What was your sense of the draft at the time?
The draft?
The draft, yeah. Sorry, beg your pardon. It's a funny accent.
So I had two positions on the draft, an early position and then a later position.
Yeah.
So in my early position, I was against the draft because I believed, and I still believe actually, that it's unconstitutional. Because the Constitution says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude can exist within the United States. The draft has to be involuntary servitude. I know those laws had to do with slavery, but the law is the fucking law. Involuntary servitude is involuntary servitude. And when David Harris and I were going around speaking about those things, our detractors would say, if we get rid of the draft, it'll be an all-volunteer army. And then the public's not going to care. And I thought, I didn't believe that. Well, they were right and I was wrong. And now because we don't have a draft, we're at war in 7 different countries. We do what the hell we want. And when I went to the University of Florida, there was half as many students. And when we would have an anti-war demonstration, we would have 2,000-3,000 students in the street. Today, there's something like 50,000 students. Where the hell are they? Where are they? So I think that the draft is part of that reason. And if we had a draft and every family had to wonder whether or not their kid was going to be sent off to some stupid war, they'd pay more attention to what was going on and we might not have the crap that we have.
Yeah.
So now I would support a draft.
Yeah. That's an interesting inversion because it usually goes the other way around. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Deborah? No? I can't thank you enough. It's been an honor.
My pleasure.
Absolute honor. It's hard for me. I don't want to make it about me, but I watched my own country turn around. South African. Watched my own country turn around and had to sort of, it was sort of seeing a soul like come to terms with it, with his nation's own complicity and his people's own complicity, and have to wrestle with that as an ethical being, coming to terms with oneself. It's not done enough in this country,
So today, guys who I was with in Vietnam have reunions.
Yeah.
And I'm not very welcome. In the infantry group, I'm considered a traitor because I came home from Vietnam, I went to Congress, and I testified about war crimes that we committed. And I've said things to those people that have made them very angry because my mouth gets me into trouble and I say what I think. So these guys, who I love and who hate me, they post all of the time how proud they are that their kids are in Afghanistan, that their kids are in Iraq, that their kids are in the service. I have no ability to empathize or understand that. I would never want anyone I loved or cared for to go through the suffering that we did in war. Not only the suffering at the time, but the memories that last forever. I would never wish that on anyone. So I don't have an understanding of how those guys who were right next to me, who saw the same suffering, who suffered themselves, think it's okay for their kids to do that. So I accused them of not, specifically, of not having learned jack shit from their experience in Vietnam and doing their kids a disservice by pointing their kids to the military. So I'm a whoa bad guy. In the other unit, we just had a reunion April 18th. So on April 18th, 1966, my third week in Vietnam, we were overrun.
Yeah.
So April 18th of this year, we went to the wall, 50 years to the day, to pay our respects to those guys on the wall. So I went there, and there were some people who were unhappy with me being there also. But there were other people who, like me, have become anti-war, but we're very, very much in the minority. And I don't, there are a lot of veterans that dislike me.
Is there a way, this is one of the things that often occurs to me, is that people who experience that kind of trauma attach themselves to an ideology that makes sense of it, rather than one that is necessarily...
Very good question. So I ask questions about it, and people will say, Scott, if I say the war was wrong, that means Joe died for nothing. That means Mac is going to be in a wheelchair the rest of his time, the rest of his life for nothing. I can't say that. I cannot say that. So, I understand that from their point of view. I don't understand that from my point of view, because the truth has to come first. You know, how can you just ignore it? How could you have your kids go down that same path? That's nuts.
Yeah.
So I'm disliked by the pro-war crowd, and I'm disliked by a lot of veterans.
It's a complicated position.
It doesn't bother me at all. I'm 100% comfortable with where I am. Not only that, I've demonstrated the ability to change my position when I'm confronted with facts. And so it'd be pretty dumb to be confronted by facts and still hold a position that's stupid.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I can change my position. You bring me facts, change my position.
Yeah. This is the thing that keeps on striking me in this work, is that like people think about that war is always intimate, right? And people's justifications and people's ideologies and people's politics is always intimate. So that you can, when you talk about your experience, it's like, to be good with yourself, you have to abide by the truth of what happened. But that's intimate as much as it is global, universal, right?
I hadn't thought of it that way. I just think of it as, I want to be able to look at that picture in the mirror and like who that person is.
Yeah. Well, again, I can't thank you enough. I am deeply moved. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah.